Hi there, and welcome to open class number 138. Hope you're doing really well today. We are going to look at three messages. One is from Miguel, and this is actually just a success story. Really, Miguel is sharing, his journey, and I think we can learn a lot from that. And then two questions as well. Before we jump in, as always, nothing here is medical advice, just general thoughts that I hope can help anyone that tunes in. And one more thing, which was yesterday I shared that my new book, How to Become a Sleep Coach, is available on Amazon. But I think it may take a little while before it kind of propagates to all the different Amazon sites in the world. So some people have said, oh, it's not available in my region. It may just take some time. And the second thing was, yes, I forgot to say yesterday that it is coming out as an ebook, and it'll just take a little time, maybe 1 or 2 weeks before that is done. So that is coming as well. Okay, with that said, let us take a look at these questions. And in fact, let's take a look at the first thing, which is Miguel's story. Let's read this. It's a long one, by the way. So if you're looking for more like the typical questions and answers, you can jump ahead. But here's Miguel's success story. Miguel says, "Hey Daniel. My name is Miguel, and I finally decided to write you with the sole purpose of thanking you and giving hope to other people who suffer from insomnia caused by sleep anxiety. Thank you so much, Miguel, for doing this. It really means so much. I do not have a question. It is just a message to you. I was always a good sleeper, even though I suffer from chronic anxiety. My family has diverse anxiety problems, and some of them are heavily medicated. My sleep was never particularly affected. I used to travel a lot. I was able to sleep on night buses, planes, train stations, and even in the street. Once I started working in shifts 8 years ago, I became obsessed with sleep. I was always in a rush to compensate the nights before the morning shifts. Incredibly, that never resulted in insomnia. But 4 years ago, everything changed. The end of a relationship and the amount of stress due to work and study at the same time made me stop sleeping. And my previous obsession made it almost a chronic problem. For the first time in my life, I was searching on the internet for cures to only find out about sleep hygiene, scary stories, and CBTi. I tried to go to the doctor by trying to explain that my palpitations were not letting me fall asleep, but I was ashamed. To be honest, I didn't really know how to talk about it, even with my friends or family. Was it a common problem? I didn't know anyone else complaining about insomnia. But in a couple of months, I solved the problem by myself. I realized it was the fear of the sleeplessness that was giving me extreme anxiety at night. So I started going to bed accepting I wouldn't sleep that night, and it worked. The biggest challenge at the time was when I had a big event the next day. But after a while, I was managing it well by proving to myself how well I could do things even on 1 or 2 hours of sleep. For some years, I didn't struggle with insomnia at all, and the fear was not bothering me anymore until March of this year. Because of the pandemic and the fact that I was laid off, I started going to bed later and later, and eventually I had no routines at all, and I started sleeping bad again. But that didn't scare me much. But the problem came back 1 week after, and my anxiety went through the roof, triggered by the pandemic, tough winter, isolation. I really don't know. My panic and fear had never been so extreme, and my old methods apparently were not a short term solution. I started to have persistent hypnic jerks, panic attacks, and I had to go constantly to the toilet at night. It was just impossible to sleep, and I reached a point where I got 0 hours of sleep. Particularly, the hypnic jerks scared me a lot since I couldn't find much information about it on the internet. I went to the ER, and the doctor didn't know about it either. They sent me to a psychologist and to my general practitioner. My fear of having many nights of no sleep in a row made me extremely dramatic, and my GP felt it was right to prescribe me a very high dose of a unique antidepressant, 30 milligrams of mirtazapine. Despite having stopped the panic attacks and the fact that I slept 9 hours the night I first took it, starting the antidepressants was the biggest mistake of my life so far. Side effects on and after stopping it were horrendous, and insomnia eventually came back anyway. I kept taking the pill for some months with the hope that the side effects would eventually subside and my anxiety would be under control. Never happened. But I started looking for other solutions for my sleep problems anyway. My sleep pattern was strange. I would sleep well one night, almost nothing the other night. Started reading everything I found about insomnia, including the quote unquote big books from Sasha Stevens to Greg Jacobs. Thankfully, I didn't read the one from Matt Walker, exclamation mark. I also read a book about ACT that, despite my methods 4 years ago, made me laugh for being so quote unquote simple. CBTi was apparently the way to go. I tried it by myself since there's no clinics in my country. Coincidence or not, after starting it, I went for the first time in months, 3 weeks with no insomnia. I was happy despite the side effects of the medication, but the insomnia came back, but not bothering me as much anymore. By that time, I had found your YouTube channel, a bit too late, I would say, and the interviews and all the information, including on the hypnic jerks, made me feel better with my insomnia. I was not alone, it seemed. Slowly, I relearned from your channel that it is the desire to not have insomnia at all that makes the problem bigger. Once I stopped the medication, I got extreme withdrawal symptoms that made me not sleep at all again. But incredibly, I was rational enough to teach myself that not sleeping was not my fault anymore, my fear, my anxiety, but it was just my brain adjusting itself without the pills, and that it would eventually get better. The withdrawal symptoms were so extreme, throwing up for 10 days in a row, akathisia, suicidal thoughts, tremors, etc. I had to quit my job and move to the country where my family lives. During this period, I started using acceptance as a way to cope with the symptoms, maybe due to the fact that my life was ruined anyway, and there was no point to fight. And I felt like my brain and body learned that reacting physically to stress or problems were the cause of the whole nightmare I was going through. I try not to fight anxiety anymore. I just kind of absorb it. As I read somewhere, as I read somewhere, there's nothing worse than what we do to ourselves. External problems can be difficult, but the way we react can make them much worse. Trying to suppress emotions make them stronger. Have you tried to suppress a laugh? How did that work for you? I learned all the possible breathing exercises. They gave me some quick relief, but the anxiety was still there, and it would later become more and more intense. I'm still not sure about this since my family struggles with anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, but I think it becomes a chronic problem when we have anxiety of anxiety, a painful, vicious cycle. It has been almost 5 months since I took the last pill, and I'm slowly feeling better. The use of the medication might have made me histamine intolerant, so when I suffer histamine overload, it is hard to sleep, but mentally I'm able to keep myself calm. I rarely have insomnia now since I'm learning how to cope with the histamine use issue, but that is not the victory I want to share with you because I don't know the future. Exactly today, I ended up randomly reading on the internet about FFI again, and I panicked. But I see it as a test to my ACT skills. The victory I want to share is exactly how your method, that has so much in common with ACT, proved being the best one to make me have a good life again. In January, I'm going to Africa for some volunteering work, and afterwards, I'm supposed to come back to my country and restart my old job again. And I'm afraid, after many months of suffering and the trauma I got from it, made me fear every day that I'll have insomnia again. But I don't react to that fear. I just try to keep it there and take the best out of it. Tomorrow I might have a big event, and tonight I will have anxiety, but it's okay if I don't fight it. The palpitations and adrenaline rushes might eventually go away. I will even leave the light on, try to keep myself awake, and very likely I will fall asleep anyway. Today I look behind and conclude that for us who have sleep anxiety, ACT is better than CBTi. CBTi would work better for those whose sleep problem are more related to bad routines or more physical issues, I believe. But assuming that sleep drive through brute force overtakes the fight or flight response or hyperarousal depends too much on each person and the level of anxiety a person is experiencing. Despite the little and fast success I had when I tried CBTi, I don't imagine myself being a slave to sleep efforts for a long time. Alina from Sleep Talks once wrote on her Instagram page, "Peaceful sleep is a consequence of a fulfilling life." Also, in theory, sleep efforts should increase anxiety every time they don't work, and most of the times they work through a placebo effect. Some things can make us have a hard time sleeping, as drinking coffee late or not having a routine, but what makes us sleep like babies is feeling relaxed, and relaxation is never an effort, is it? You and Alina have the best advice on sleep I've found, and I wanted to thank you for your work. Your steps to reach immunity to insomnia makes total sense to me, but I want to tell people that it takes time to reach that immunity and to install acceptance into the brain. It is even harder when there is a trauma associated with the bed, the nighttime, etc. Facing the trauma and fears are the only way, I think. We might have anxiety the first night, second, third, but just wait for your body and brain to do the work for you. Unless you feel hungry and need to go to the toilet, stay in bed. Welcome all those symptoms. our bodies should get used to the anxiety and will not react physically to it. Sleep is a reflex. Let it happen naturally. Sorry for my English. It is not my mother tongue. I hope what I wrote makes sense. Miguel, it absolutely did. It made so much sense. And, for anyone that, is hearing this, there was some kind of key things that I thought could be helpful to point out. And one of them was this very common scenario where you had some trouble sleeping and you actually didn't do much, like you didn't react very much to it. You kind of like let it be, and then things got easier. And in Miguel's case here, there was actually there was a lot of insight. In fact, it was not the most common version of this, which is I had some trouble sleeping and I kind of just ignored it and then it went away. It was actually like Miguel realized that I'm just afraid of not sleeping, and it's a fear, and there's nothing more to it. There was a lot of insight that first time, but still, this thing that I call priming may have happened. And what I mean with the priming is like when you have trouble sleeping one time, and it is not 100% clear how how it was the absence of effort that led you to sleeping well again. Then there can be this priming, this idea that there is this potential problem, potential danger. There's this kind of threat there somewhere, and I'm just happy I don't have to deal with it now, right now. It's kind of like it's a nicer place than being in a struggle, but it's still tricky when you're in this, when you have this mindset of there is a potential threat that can come back, particularly when you end up in this with the real, like when what I really mean with the priming is someone who, let's say, had some trouble sleeping and they started taking, let's say, some CBT or some vitamin or something like that, and they sleep better for a while. It can seem like a really nice place to be in, but the continuous effort of doing something to kind of keep the threat away is kind of priming. And what I mean with priming is you're teaching the brain that there is a threat, and because you're actually doing something to kind of keep it away, and that can happen for months, for years. And then when there is some more stress and you have trouble sleeping again, then often that the trouble sleeping is really intense because of this priming, this entrenching of the idea that there is a potential threat that can happen. And I don't know if this happens for you, Miguel, or but the fact that you remember that period of trouble sleeping from the past suggests that there could have been a little bit of this priming happening, and it could be part of the reason why in March things got so intense. And also, by the way, other reasons why so many people had trouble, in these times of the pandemic is, the stress of losing a job, for example, the stress of the pandemic itself. And then oftentimes, even if you're not, if you didn't lose your job, many of us are working maybe less hours, we're working from home, etc. We have more time and bandwidth to start problem solving, which also leads to a lot of struggle sometimes. And the other thing to point out here is like Miguel sees that sort of like acceptance is the only way, and it is not an easy process. It's often a quite painful process to see this, because we naturally want to do things. When we're suffering, we want to do something to make that pain go away, but often the process is one of seeing that we try something, like Miguel tried medications that helped for a little bit, just maybe one night, but ultimately didn't help. Tried CBTi, that ultimately didn't help. Breathing exercises, ultimately that didn't help. Something didn't help. It didn't work. That's kind of painful, because it feels like, it feels discouraging, like nothing works. But that is the process of kind of teaching ourselves acceptance, installing acceptance, as Miguel said. I think it happens by seeing over and over and over again that there's really nothing we can do to have control. And that sort of installs that acceptance that helps with sleep and in so many other areas of life. And the last point that Miguel made, that there's still a lot of fear, but the fear doesn't bother me as much. I'm so glad when I hear that. I'm so glad when I hear that, because when somebody says, I'm not scared anymore, that's nice. But then what happens when you are scared, right? How are you going to react to that? We don't know. But when someone says, I'm really scared, but it doesn't bother me so much, or I didn't sleep much last night, but that doesn't bother me so much, then we're so close to a place where there's really so much peace because of that absence of a strong reaction or trying to escape, etc. So yeah, Miguel, super glad to read these lines. And Alina, she's wonderful. Anybody who's not following her, I highly recommend it. I think she's mainly active on Instagram, Sleep Talks Ali. And yeah, let's proceed. Thanks again, Miguel. Let's take a look at the two other messages that came in here. Jason says the following. Hi, Daniel. I've asked this in a few places. Sorry about that. Just looking for help as I'm really worried about my recent sleeplessness. Insomnia sprung back on me about a week ago. Maybe some factors, Moderna booster, quitting my prescription for sleep medication, time change, etc. But I've now had 4 sleepless nights this week. I'm trying to start CBTi, but I've had 2 sleepless nights doing that so far out of 3 nights. Is that typical? I'm worried that more sleepless nights could cause serious health problems, but I want to cure my insomnia drug-free and will accept the pain for the long-term gain. Is all the sleeplessness atypical? I'm an overanalyzer and problem solver by nature, but I'm a little concerned that sleep restriction and stimulus control are making me hyper-aroused and focus on all these cues for sleep. It's hard to let go. Will I suffer long-term serious health problems from the sleeplessness if I don't get it under control soon? Thanks for any advice you can share, Jason. Anytime, Jason, and if we can actually start with this last sentence here, will I suffer health problems if I don't get this under control soon? Baked into this question, there is an assumption that is actually quite problematic, I think, which is that it is possible to get it under control. This is what I call the illusion of controllability, and that illusion happens so naturally for 2 reasons. One is that when we have trouble sleeping, or other troubles in our lives like anxiety, emotional things like that. But let's stay here with sleep. So when we have trouble sleeping, for example, we often look at how things were before, or look at other people and see that before I slept well, other people sleep well, and then from that, the brain, who's looking for a solution for a problem, for that brain, it is very attractive to have this idea that there is control to be had. I had control in the past, or other people have control. That idea is very attractive because then it's just a matter of finding a way to have that control and everything is good. But in reality, we sleep well when we don't try to control sleep. Other people sleep well because they don't try to control sleep. We slept well in the past because we didn't attempt to control sleep. So I think the first kind of teaching point here is that it is when we let go of trying to have control, that's when it happens all by itself. And the other part of this sentence, and the sentence was something like, will I suffer serious health problems if I don't get this under control soon? So the first part about serious health problems is also very important to talk about. And I've written a whole book. I don't see it laying around anywhere here, but it's called Why We Don't Sleep. And it's actually an answer, in a way, to Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. And in that book, I go over literature, and it is not like exhausting the literature in any way, but I go over some of the most important studies, I think, and see that there's no evidence whatsoever that show that short sleep or insomnia causes any health problems at all. There's just no evidence whatsoever to back that up. And periodically, people here on the channel bring up studies, and we review them. We do this kind of journal clubs here, and it's always the same. It's like a scary headline, but there's nothing to it. So the second thing I want to point out here is that, again, there is no evidence whatsoever that short sleep or insomnia causes any health problems, and knowing that often takes so much pressure off. Now, Jason writes here about attempting CBTi, and when I read that, I see someone who has trouble sleeping who reads about CBTi, says, I'm going to try CBTi. And when they say try CBTi, what they mean is, I'm going to do the sleep restriction and stimulus control, and that is CBTi. In reality, I think what actually helps when it comes to CBTi is the C portion. It's like learning that sleep, learning about sleep, learning that short sleep hasn't been shown to cause any health problems, learning the 3P model, which teaches us that basically the more we try to do things to sleep, the more problem we have, right? That part of CBTi I think is really helpful. But the behavioral things like the sleep restriction, stimulus control, I think typically is very, very tricky, right? Because for the exact reasons you mentioned, Jason, that when you have trouble sleeping and then you're told like, well, you should only spend 5 hours in bed. Okay, you have to get up at 5. You cannot go to bed before midnight. That makes you focus even more on sleep, right? And it's the focus, it's the attention towards sleep that is a problem to begin with. The attempt of control at having control, and like embedded in the ideas behind like these CBTi like behavioral ideas is that implied controllability idea that if you just do this, you will sleep. It's like it implies that you can have control. So I think CBTi is very, very tricky. I think it's very, very tricky. And so to answer the question, yes, it is quite common that someone tries CBTi in the same way you did, Jason, and has more trouble sleeping. But you know, on the flip side, it is also typical to see that whatever you do, just starting to learn and change some habits and things like that in a helpful way, in a kind of reasonable way, that also can lead to a little bit of what I call an extinction burst. That whenever you change something initially, the brain goes like, you change something, how's this, what's going to happen? And this kind of self-monitoring can lead to like a short-term, increase in the intensity of the struggle before it fades. That is not uncommon at all either. Very, very normal and typical. So I guess in conclusion here, Jason, I hope this what I shared so far was helpful. And finally, just want to say that nothing you shared here is common, strange, unusual at all. The speed bump playlist can be really, really helpful for you, I think, as you saw things getting easier, and then you have the speed bump again. So check out the speed bump playlist that's in the description of any new video. I think that will help a lot. Okay, Jason, let us know how things go and stay in touch, okay? Then finally, we are going to Thomas. Let's read this. Hi, Daniel. For the past few months, I have fallen into a pattern of 2 to 3 nights of poor sleep, go to bed around 11 p.m., wake up after a few hours, then not able to sleep until I rise at 6 a.m. During these nights, I often get up, read or listen to podcasts, or just lie comfortably in bed. Following these nights, I will have one good night where I do fall back to sleep after waking in the middle of the night. Then the pattern repeats itself with 2 or 3 poor nights. I was told by my family doctor that this is not uncommon for people my age. I'm 71. Just cope as best as I can and take Ambien when needed. Should I just accept that my pattern will be with me for the rest of my life? I don't get anxious at night. I just don't get back to sleep most nights. Unfortunately, most days after poor nights are often full of emotional swings, memory lapses, bowel problems. Will this get better on its own or worse over time? I don't want to take drugs, but I seem stuck in this pattern. Thank you for offering your perspective on this as a sleep doctor. Very well, Thomas, thanks so much for submitting this. And I want to say that, just repeat that. Nothing here is medical advice. I happen to be a sleep doctor. This is true, but I don't practice sleep medicine anymore. And, 98% of everything I share, teach here are things that I've learned from this community, actually, from reading, from pondering, but mostly from interacting with people. Had nothing to do with my medical background whatsoever. And so, firstly, I want to say that these type of patterns are extremely common, very, very common. A very common one is the on-off pattern, where someone says, I sleep okay one night, and then I hardly sleep the next night. That is a very common pattern. I sleep I sleep poorly for 2 or 3 nights, and then I have one night where I sleep better. Very, very common too. And more complex patterns are also common, like I sleep well for 2 nights, then I don't sleep for one night, then I sleep well for one night, then I don't sleep for 2 nights, and then things like that. Very, very common. Now, it was said here that this is something that's age related, and I think these patterns, I don't think have anything to do with age. It is true that as children, we often sleep like we have more consolidated sleep. We have we wake up less. It's less fragmented, and our total sleep time is more. And as we grow older, we wake up a little bit more times. Our total sleep time maybe decrease a little bit. It gets a little bit more fragmented. I think that's normal. But this pattern, I don't think has anything to do with age whatsoever. I think the pattern has more to do with with just general sleep physiology. And so, what do I mean with that? Well, I think really everything that we talk about on this channel can be explained by the gas and brake model. And I'm kind of smiling a little bit here because part of my brain says that's not entirely true. There is, of course, jet lag and circadian rhythm things that aren't necessarily explained by this model. But again, that is very rarely relevant. I think what we talk about here, these patterns, they can easily be explained by the gas and brake model, which you can study in the This Is Natto playlist that's in the description of any new video. There you can find an entire video dedicated to the gas and brake model. But very briefly, it goes like this. When we don't sleep, when we're awake, then our sleep drive, our body's sort of need for sleep increases, just as we become more hungry the longer time we don't eat. Just a very typical normal homeostatic process in the body. That's our sleep drive, okay? And then we have the brake in the sleep system, okay? And that's hyperarousal, and that's like a safety thing that we have a brake in our sleep system, because we shouldn't sleep when there is some type of danger or threat near us. Imagine if you're about to fall asleep and then you realize that you left the oven on, then you immediately become very awake. And if you have a problem turning off the oven, then of course you should be awake. You should not sleep when it's dangerous. It's normal, very typical safety thing that we have a break in the sleep system. When it comes to insomnia, the reason it happens is because there's a confusion in the safety center of our brains, where it starts thinking that not sleeping is a threat. Not sleeping is dangerous. Not sleeping is something that shouldn't happen. So wakefulness, which is another word for not sleeping, wakefulness triggers the brake in our sleep system. So we can have this scenario where we are indeed sleepy, but the brain is afraid of being awake, and that triggers our brake. And that happens when we have insomnia. What does it have to do with this pattern? Well, what so often happens is we have, let's say, you have 2 nights where you sleep little, right? So that leads to an increase in that sleep drive. We are definitely needing to sleep, right? But then also we have this expectation that, okay, I've had these 2 nights or 3 nights of little sleep, so tonight I'll probably sleep well, which leads to like you're not so worried about not sleeping, because you kind of expect that you will sleep. You're not, you have less effort, and then the sleep drive in combination with the less break leads to one night where you sleep easier. But then, after that, the fear comes back. Okay, I had the good night now. What's going to happen tonight? Am I going to get 2 nights in a row for a first time, or is this pattern going to continue? And this preoccupation, this worry, it triggers that hyperarousal, which is the break in our sleep system, and then you don't sleep for 1, 2, 3 nights, etc. Nothing strange or unusual. Very, very common, extremely common. And so, how can we meet this pattern? I think there are sort of 2 ways we can meet this pattern. And one is sort of practical. The other one is more, how should I put it? Has more to do with kind of mindset and how we think about things. So the practical one is, if we look at what Thomas shared here, going to bed at 11, may fall asleep, but wake up just a few hours later, up until 6 a.m. And then finally at 6 a.m., feel sleepy and then can sleep. This is what we call surrender sleep, by the way, because at 6 a.m. you typically you gave up. You're like, I'm not even going to try sleeping anymore, and then we sleep easier. Versus at like 2 or 3 a.m., then you're still trying to sleep, right? And then it becomes tricky. So when we surrender, when we give up, that's when sleep happens, which we can learn a lot from, by the way, because if we sort of give up from the very beginning, if you go to bed at 11 and be like, I don't know if I'm going to sleep or not, and I'm not even going to try because I have no control, that helps a lot. And by the way, not knowing what time it is, and maybe you've already doing this at Thomas, but keeping your night timeless often helps. Now, that was a little sidetrack. Going back to the overall pattern. So Thomas goes to bed at 11, falls asleep, wakes up a few hours, and then finally sleeps again at 6 a.m. And I'm just going to say that Thomas sleeps from 6 a.m. until, let's say, 9 a.m. Well, then guess what? Then you have allotted 10 hours for sleep. You've given yourself from 11 p.m. till 9 a.m. for sleep. That whole period of time has been sort of like an effort to sleep, like you're giving, and that is very natural. It happens all the time. but paradoxically, it can actually help to not give yourself so much of an opportunity for sleep. Uh, this can help when it comes to sleep drive, because if you get up, let's say at 7 a.m., no matter what, then your sleep drive can be a little stronger in the evening. This is true. But I think changing this pattern is more helpful for another reason, which is, and that reason is when we stop chasing sleep, and when we're teaching the brain that it's not something that needs to be chased, and that leads to a lot of like diminishing in effort. So let's say you decide that, okay, no matter what happens, I'm gonna get up at 7. I'm not gonna sleep beyond 7, and I'm not gonna check the time after 11. If I feel sleepy at 11, I'll allow sleep to happen. If not, I'll just not check the time and do something I enjoy. That achieves that the two things actually of preserving some sleep drive, but more importantly, reducing that hyperarousal by teaching the brain that we don't have to chase sleep. Okay, so the practical aspect here was you can just a lot less time for sleep and keep a regular rise time. That I think that can really help. And the second one is a more mindset here, and this is a very nice way I think to meet these patterns. And goes back to the gas and brake model, where we see that there's nothing mysterious about sleep, nothing strange at all. When we are not trying to sleep, when we surrender, sleep happens. When we're trying to fix it, when we're problem solving, when we're wanting to achieve sleep, then we have some struggle. So you can take this and reinforce this teaching no matter what your night was like. How do you do this? It's quite simple. I call this the pendulum method. And so when it's morning and you had a night where you were awake most of the night, you didn't sleep hardly at all, you can simply say, this happened because I was trying to sleep. This happened because of effort. This happened because I was a little bit anxious. That's all. Nothing strange. Nothing that needs to be pondered or figured out. That was all. And then when you have a night where you slept more, you can simply say, oh, that happened because I wasn't trying as much. I was more willing to be awake. That's all. And no more pondering. That's all. You can meet every night like that. And I think these were the most important points. And the final one actually comes to my mind as I'm speaking here. Thomas shared that after a night of little sleep, there's all this like the emotional roller coaster, like all this emotional discomfort. And I think it's so helpful to see that has nothing to do or little to do with hours slept. We can actually be awake for most of the night when we're excited about like a wedding we're going to go to or something like that, and still have a great day, right? But that those feelings are a result of the struggle, the result of the idea that we can have control, the attempt at having control, the pondering, the analysis, the Googling, the researching, and also the self-criticism, the why can't I sleep? Why can't I get this under control? What's happening to me? That type of self-criticism that leads to this fatigue and all the other discomforts that we feel during the day. And that is really an invitation towards self-kindness. And the more we treat ourselves nicely and say, I didn't sleep much last night, and that's because I was a little anxious. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with me. Nothing strange happening. Be really gentle and kind with yourself. Talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend, or like you would talk to your grandson or something like that. That can really help. So Thomas, hope this helped. These were the things that came to mind, and I just want to say thanks for everyone for submitting some messages here. Miguel, thanks for sharing your story. Thomas and Jason, hope this was helpful to you, and that's all. Hope to see you back here soon, and until then, take care, everyone.